Here are the factors that I find slow people down the most after awakening. Now, of course, there are no true mistakes. And when it comes to realization, it kind of goes at its own pace in various ways. But I do notice patterns, and I notice some commonalities in people who really struggle with the process after awakening. First, I want to offer a broad umbrella under which all of these factors fall, and that is fighting the process. It's a really bad idea, especially after awakening and as things deepen, to fight the process, to decide this twist or turn in how things are going is not what you signed up for, and you're going to fight it and you're going to try to make it not happen or try to make it happen the way you think you want it to happen. It's a really bad idea because you're really struggling with a force and a power just completely beyond you. And I see this cause a tremendous amount of suffering in people. Now, sometimes it's because they don't actually know what's happening. I've met many people who went through this first awakening without even knowing what it was. And so the conditions that occurred afterward felt so uncomfortable, they didn't know what to do but run from them. I've seen this result in substance abuse or other self-defeating behaviors, and or having an attitude that is anti-spirituality or awakening, knowing that the process is happening, but you want to shake your fist at it or stomp your feet and just wish it wasn't there. For obvious reasons, these are all just really bad ideas. But generally speaking, it's some form of trying to fight the process, not letting it take center stage in your life, because it will. And the deeper it goes, the more center stage it becomes, and there's really nothing you can do about that. You can try, but it's just painful, and it gets more painful. So that's the broad truth of what I see in people that struggle a lot after awakening. Now, I can also give some specific examples that I see as commonalities among people who struggle unnecessarily with this process. One is an unwillingness to do the emotional work or the shadow work, and or not actually understanding the nature of that work. Trying to spiritually bypass and believe that everything is peace and love, or that everything is nothing and there's no one there and there's nothing to do. Either one of those views or attitudes will pretty effectively cause you to set up an avoidance pattern that's unhealthy and that's pretty inauthentic, and it will become more inauthentic the more you try to go down that path. You're better off just to turn and face the shadow. Feel what you need to feel. Admit what you need to admit to yourself. Let those repressed emotions come to the surface. Feel into them, sit with them. Inquire into your beliefs and ideas about them and into the resistance patterns around them. And most of all, just be patient and realize this is a very, very important part of the process. If you try to skip this and just run around telling yourself everything is one and unity and there's nothing and no one and nothing to do and no work to do, you're just selling yourself a bill of goods. It's not a good idea. So I'd say that's probably the most prominent thing I see is unwillingness or avoidance of the emotion work, the shadow work. Now, we're all going to have some of that. It's pretty much built into mind identification to avoid, to stay detached, to stay in the mind and use the mind to avoid difficult sensations and so forth. But again, after awakening, you almost have to do it knowingly, and you will to some degree. But as you mature in this, you'll hopefully just start to face it. Let the emotion move through the body. Let yourself feel what it feels like to be anger. Let yourself feel what it feels like to be sadness. Let yourself feel what it feels like to be confusion, frustration, guilt, resentment, all of them. It's just a matter of really allowing that to be what it is, allowing the conditions to present how they present without trying to change it through some idea you have about what spirituality is supposed to be or how you should feel or what you should be experiencing. Number 2 is thinking you're done, which kind of relates to number 1. I think a lot of these in one way or another are related to avoidance of emotion work, but just convincing yourself you're done and that how this is just how it is and it couldn't be other than this and there's nothing but presence or oneness or unity or bliss, or there's nothing but the self with a big S, and that's it. There's just nothing more to do. Or there's just there's formless awareness. All there is formless awareness. So where else are you going to go from there? You can't get less than 0 sort of thing, but you're not done. And there's a lot more to go. There's more emotional work to do, and then there's subtle perceptual filters to address. So the conclusion that awakening equals I'm just done can really set you up to confuse yourself and confuse others around you, even if you start teaching it and so forth. So that's number 2. Number three is not seeking counsel at all. So seeking counsel is to expose yourself in one form or another to someone who's walked this path before you, who has realized deeper insights. That may be a formal arrangement with a teacher. It may be informal. It may be online. It may be in a group setting. And it may even be watching videos and reading books. But it's most effective with some back and forth and interaction and question and answer and engagement. So I think that's invaluable. It's not impossible to walk this path without that, but it really, really helps, and it will accelerate the process because they'll help you see blind spots you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So I think it's very valuable to have some sort of mentor, teacher, counselor that's got some deeper insight about this process. Number 4 is develop a daily meditation habit. I see some people just have too much aversion to meditation. And although I do often say when approaching first awakening or to wake up, meditation's not really essential, and it's not nearly as important a factor as I think a lot of people believe. But after awakening and as realization deepens, it's important to just cultivate some silence in your life. We live in an incredibly busy world. We stay distracted and overly active all the time. It's pretty unnatural, actually. And it's important to learn to trust the intelligence of silence, of peace, of rest. Now, you may or may not call that meditation, but practically speaking, I think it's very valuable to set aside 1 to 2 hours a day for just sitting, whether it's sitting in presence, natural meditation, shikantaza, some form of inquiry, mantra meditation, but undistracted meditation, sitting in silence. I think that's very valuable. And if you don't do it at all, you may even have an insight about no self, but the selfing will be strong, has a lot of momentum, and you're not really doing much to break that momentum if you just stay busy, busy, busy all the time. So I think it's pretty valuable to prioritize silence and rest, but alert and awake conscious rest, not just sleep, on a daily basis. And the last thing I'm going to say here is something that's a little hard to describe or talk about because it's very subtle, but I find it to be very important. And that is, for a long time after awakening and in deeper realization movements, we will continue to have this fundamental or background belief that things just are a certain way. The realization is a certain type of process and it follows certain rules and it's going to end up a certain way. And we hold these views or these frames of reference around that without realizing it. And it's not just about realization. We hold those about ourselves and about the world, but it ends up getting applied to realization unknowingly. And if we're not clear on this, that it's a very fundamental function of the mind, it really will bind us and we won't realize it. So another way of saying this is you have to be willing to enter groundlessness. You have to be willing to enter this truth, not a place, there's no entering, but realizing this truth that there is no foundation. There's no ground of being. There's no way that things are. There's no fundamental truth. There's no actually existing state of anything. There's no position that's not relative to another position, that's not dependently originated. So an overlooking or an unwillingness to let go of the most fundamental orientation or tendency to orient really holds a good number of people up. But this is very deep stage realization stuff I'm talking about here, and you may or may not be able to feel into that. But it really is important that at some point everything goes. All of your value system around spirituality itself has to go. The old saying, when you meet the Buddha on the road, you slay the Buddha. That has different depths of meaning, but at this depth, it's even the specialness of awakening, enlightenment, so forth, goes away completely. You could also call this the death of any remnant of self. The most subtle perfume of self just goes. And with that, the most fundamental perfume that the world is a certain way, that the universe is a certain way, that truth is a certain way, that there's an actually existing standpoint, ground, truth, all of that just goes completely away. Now, to the mind, that might sound scary or very destabilizing, but what we're talking about here is pretty far beyond the realization of non-conceptual truth. So usually at this point, it doesn't feel so threatening. It's just easy to overlook because it's so subtle. So hopefully these are helpful. So give me some feedback if you want to hear any more about any of these or have anything else to add yourself, or just let me know in general how this comes across.